Hey, good morning, and welcome to the Comics Experience Graphic Novel of the Month Club for the month of December 2018. It is December 16th, and our book this month is the fantastic Norroway. You guys like that book, right?
Yeah!
Woo! That's what I like. That's a response I like. There we go. We're really lucky to have Kit Seaton here with us live and in person. Hello, Kit.
Hello.
Welcome, and thanks for coming out. And before we start, I want to thank our sponsors at The Beat, because you always want to thank your sponsor. That's the nice thing to do. We'll talk about that more later. Okay, so Norroway, fantastic book. I loved this. You guys all loved it, yeah? Yeah. Nice. Beautiful artwork. Love this stuff. Let's ask the first question always is, why comics? What is it about comics that made that the thing that you want to do?
Oh, I think it's because I loved them a lot as a kid growing up. I got started on, I started reading Calvin and Hobbes when I was about 6 years old. It was when it was first coming out, like the first annual. My parents got me that collection, and every time it came out the following year, that was always my Christmas gift, and I just binge read that thing. I even made my own like really lame knockoff Calvin and Hobbes comics when I was 6. And then one of my mother's students, because she was a high school theater teacher, found out that I liked comics, so he gave her just a bunch of stuff that he had that he didn't want anymore. So there was like some Spider-Man in there, there was Gru the Barbarian and ElfQuest and some pretty wild stuff. So that had a huge impact on me in my formative years. I think ever since then I've just always kind of loved them, and then I just dragged Kat into it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so originally we were going to do Kat on a video call. It just didn't work out. The technology didn't work out this time.
Guys.
It happens. But I'm sort of curious, Kit and Kat, are your parents...
It's a story, yeah. Because I was Kristen, and I was named for my aunt, who was Kathleen. So I'm Kristen Kathleen.
Okay.
And my parents thought they were doing this very clever name, where they essentially gave both Kat and I Welsh and Gaelic female variations of the name Christopher. But of course, there's a lot of Kristens and a lot of Caitlins, thanks to a couple of soap operas that had come out around the same time.
Sure.
So because of that sheer number, we were competing with all these Kristens and all these Caitlins, we just nicked our names, except we did it at different times. When I was young, when I couldn't write my full name when I was like 4, I would write Crit. So they just had me write Kit because it was a little bit less abrasive, I think, than writing Crit on your assignments. So then back at when I was in art school, I was going for costume design, and there was another Kristen in the costume shop, and my department chair, I remember, she was like, we are not having 2 Kristens in this costume shop. And I'm like, well, then I'll just go by what I went by when I was 4, and I'll go by Kit. And she's like, that is a designer's name. So there you go. And then Kat, same kind of thing. For a while, she was just really frustrated being one of like a sea of Caitlins. So she decided on Kat, and then we just knew it was going to be candy bar jokes from here to the end of time. Yeah.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Is she older, younger?
She is 8 years younger than me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow, you've roped your little sister into doing
I
comics.
did.
Okay.
Yes, it was very much my own kind of machinations, because I think for me, I was so involved on the visual end of things, doing the art. I was really kind of squeamish about the writing thing, because it's such a big thing and it's so easy to do wrong, that when I found out that Kat had a natural aptitude for it, I just like kept encouraging her to write so that she would just write stuff for me to draw.
Nice. That's very cool. Let's go back a little bit, though. You said you went to art school for theater design.
Yeah, so when I first went to school, I wasn't very confident in my drawing abilities, so I thought, well, I had a background in theater, my mom was a theater teacher. It just seemed like a natural progression, because I liked the stage and design and production end of things. So I went to University of North Carolina School of the Arts for a couple of years, and then realized it was just going to be mostly in sewing machine rooms at 3 o'clock in the morning, and then barking orders at actors to wear things that they didn't want to wear. So I was like, well, I could continue down that road, or I could just draw the actors wearing the things that I want them to wear and doing the things that I want them to do. It just seemed like, why don't I do that? So I kind of started And the other thing too is I did a children's book with a friend during the same time. He asked if I would illustrate a children's book for him because at the time I was worried about whether or not I would be able to afford to stay in school. He's like, well, we'll just do a book and I'll have my agent pitch it. And I was like, oh, that's a thing. So I went back and I did that children's book, and I think that made me rethink my own artistic ability and say maybe I do have a shot at this. So then when I went back home, I started, gaining some resources, and then I ultimately decided to go back to school for illustration and got degrees in illustration.
In theater design, I'm assuming there's a fair amount of illustration happening, though.
Yeah, there's a lot of visual design work that happens from the scenic design end of things and the costume design end of things. There's a lot of that. I think that there's a lot from my experience just observing and being a part of theater that does translate itself back into the work. Like just how to think about staging, how an actor moves, and how they use the space. Is a big part of what I think about when I'm sitting down and I'm doing my layouts and things like that.
So you're you did a children's book. So you mean like just a sort of traditional children's book? A
traditional children's book, yeah. And I knew nothing about children's book illustration at the time. And it's out of print now, but it was like way back in like 2002, and I was 19 trying to illustrate.
In 2002.
Right, I know, right? And I was 19, but I was a kid at the time, and I didn't know anything about the medium. I had no training in it. I didn't know that you don't fully illustrate the manuscript. You just do all the sketches first, and then you send that out.
Okay.
I gave a fully finished illustrated book, so it was very difficult for an editor to be like, what if we want to, edit. So there was some editing that had to be done, but what happened is that they had an art director on their end who went back and did some edits for that book for the artwork. And then I figured, well, if I'm going to keep doing this, maybe I should get some training. So I saved back up and went back to art school and got a few loans. And yeah.
Where did you go to art school for illustration?
I went to Rocky Mountain College of Art and Design for my undergrad, and I have an MFA from the Hartford Art School in illustration.
And neither of those were specifically comics?
No, I kind of had to work in comics sort of on my own. Comics started to creep back in. I had always kind of done them, always just sort of in my free time, but they started being a thing when I went back to school. I was working on one that was actually another adaptation of the same friend that did the children's book. He had a novel called Eve of All Saints, or A Company of Wayward Saints was what it was published under. And it was about this troupe of people that all come together trying to escape Cesare Borgia's spies in Renaissance Italy, and they inadvertently create this theatrical art form. So I was trying to do a webcomic version of that. I was going to do that as a graphic novel. So I was just taking his work and trying to adapt it. And I was just basically doing that for practice. And if you want to talk about a trunk baby, I've got like 30 different versions of the same 30 pages. I would go 30 pages, and every time you do a whole bunch of pages, you level up a little bit, right? So I would look at the beginning of the work and the end of the work, and I said, like, these don't equal. So I would go back and start again. So I've got several versions of that. And that's what I did all the time that I was in art school, was just working on these comics and then redoing these comics. And finally, I just got to the point where I was like, you know what, I just need to do something that I can finish. So he gave me a shorter story. It was another children's comic, and you can read it on my website for free. It's called Otto the Odd and the Dragon King. And it was just 40 pages, and it was at least something that I could finish. And then after that, I started doing webcomics, and I took Eve of All Saints. I stopped retconning it and started putting it online for people to read. And this was all while I was going through undergrad and then into grad school.
And when you were doing the webcomic, you just put up the work that had already been done, or were you doing it week by week?
I had built a large buffer. I had built out, I think, 40 or 50 pages ahead, and then I would put out like a page a week. And that's the rough thing about what I found about a lot of the comics that I like to do, is that the kind of comics that I like to read are the ones you can just like binge in one sitting. You just get a whole bunch of them and then you binge through all of them. So the way I was doing the webcomic, I think it was tough because it wasn't bingeable unless you were willing to like wait like a couple months and then retroactively go back and read through a bunch of pages. And then you always end on a cliffhanger. And that's what happened when we were doing Norroway, actually, for a while, because we were starting that one off as a webcomic. And we were just doing it piecemeal, a page at a time. Yeah, so...
There's no money in doing webcomics, though, right?
No, well, you have to be really, really savvy on finding a way to monetize it. And there's
Sure.
some really, really good people who have found ways to monetize
Sure.
it. For me, it was really, really difficult to try to do that and try to be a student full time, and then later on trying to be an educator full time. That I was just like, there's got to be. I should just see if I can maybe get some things published. Maybe there's enough interest out there now that I can maybe get a publisher to take a serious look. And I felt like we got really lucky. Image was willing to take a look.
Yeah, so how did that come about? I mean, this is your second book at Image.
Yeah.
The first one was Afar.
Yes. So I think having Afar really helped Norroway, and the person who kind of got me in the front door was Layla, who was my friend from school. And Layla was doing Shudder at the time, and she really wanted to write something because she had her own stories that she wanted to tell, and she wanted an artist that she could work with. So it actually was Joe Keating that recommended this, like, why don't you just ask your friend Kit if she'll do it? And so Layla reached out to me, and it was this very tentative thing, like, I'm thinking about just pitching something, are you on board? And I'm like, yeah, I'm on board, I'm just sitting here spinning my wheels, let's do it. So, and of course I was working on, just Norroway. It was going up a page at a time. At the time it was in black and white. So he said, yeah, sure. So we fleshed out the pitch, we got it all together, he accepted it, and then I started working on the pages. And then after that, since we were still working on Norroway at the time, things were kind of shaking up for me. I was taking on a different teaching position. Kat was going to do some traveling, and we just found it really, really difficult to keep maintaining that webcomic schedule, putting it up every week. Plus, I think what was really frustrating for readers is that you would get a page. That page would basically be like the book, which is just like 5 panels. Like, get whatever you can get out of 5 panels. So I think it was frustrating for our audience too. We always had this vision of it eventually just being a book. So we said, why don't we just go ahead and take the risk and see if somebody's interested in it. So we pitched it to Image, and we were surprised when they said yes. And that's the other thing too, is that you shouldn't submit things unless you anticipate that yes is a possibility,
Sure.
right? So that meant, okay, everything changes. So we took the webcomic down, and we were just like, let's start from, refresh some things, get these things ready for print. And that's what we did. It was just sort of full speed ahead. And now we're looking on getting into the second book. The script is written. I'm starting on layouts now.
Okay.
And it's been really exciting. It's kind of like, dreams and goals and aspirations starting to come true. So, yeah.
How many pages did you have up as a webcomic?
Oh gosh, maybe through about the point, I think, when Sibylla Meets Dagny, I think is what we had up.
Okay, so fairly early in the process.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And what did you have to do to make it ready for a print book? I mean, what's the difference?
The big thing that I did is I did a major recolor overhaul, because I'd colored it for the web. It's a completely different process when you're coloring for print. And I knew that they were going to do offset printing, so I wanted to go through and make sure I was coloring everything in CMYK. At the time I was teaching at SCAD, Savannah College of Art and Design.
Yeah, wait, hold on.
Yeah.
And CYMK.
CYMK
is
cyan, yellow, magenta, and black.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So those are
colors.
the basic colors that you need to put in to make things print properly when you're putting ink down on a paper.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, it's a very, very technical aspect of comics, but I was actually teaching it to students for a long time, and since I'd learned this process, I was like, oh, maybe I should use this process in the book since it's going to be using this particular printing method. So I did go back retroactively and recolor a lot of pages, refresh some of the artwork, since a lot of it by that point was 5 years old, and it was just it's different for a book, I think, than when it's a webcomic. With the webcomic, you almost expect to see the artwork grow as the artist grows.
Sure.
Because I think there is this sort of sense of a lot of people start webcomics and maybe they're using it as a way to get better at the medium and learn the medium. So there's this sense of learning and progression that happens with webcomics. So I think it's still really a really interesting aspect of that particular side of the medium. Yeah, I think that's what I wanted. I wanted the colors in the book to look really good. I wanted some of the artwork to be a little bit just, freshened up. I wanted to fix a lot of the lettering because I had learned a lot about lettering, and it was, Afar's lettering was kind of bumpy. So I wanted to make sure this time around that it was, clean and crisp and easy to read. Yeah.
Well, the final product's really nice. This is a beautiful book.
Oh gosh, thank you.
And it's really a lot longer than a lot of the books that we do here in the club. Well, there's no pagination, but but it's like what? It's like 160, 180, something like that.
It's 224 pages.
224. That's a big book. That's bigger than what we usually do here.
But there's a lot of action scenes.
Sure. So, what was production on this like? I mean, how long did it take you? Obviously, you had a chunk of it already done, but
by the time we got it pitched, I had I was most of the way through having the pages pretty much done. And I knew that was the point that I kind of wanted to have it before I pitched it to Image, because I know I was going to be coloring and lettering. So I think it was about 8 months just solid trying to color like 5 or 6 pages a day.
Okay.
At least, that was on top of my teaching load. So now that I look back on it, it's kind of a blur. It was just like every day, it was just like something for Norway, something for Norway, something for Norway. And I just chipping away at it, that's how I got it done. And somehow, I don't know what it is about the project will always fill the space allotted. If you have 6 months, it takes 6 months. If you have a year, it takes a year.
Right.
It finds a way to expand or shrink based on what the needs are.
Sure.
At least if you're like me and you're neurotic and you're just like, worried about not hitting your deadlines. So.
Yeah, though I know more than a few artists that if you give them 6 months, they need 7.
Please.
And if you give them a year, they need 13 months. It's just how it works out.
Yeah, that's right. Give them an inch, they think they're a ruler.
The work does expand. That's really interesting. When you're going forward with the book, I mean, are you doing a page a day? A little more, a little less? What's your output
it's such
like?
a thing because it's I never sit down and try to think page from beginning to end. It's really just kind of like I work in various stages throughout the process. So what I typically do is I try to get just a whole bunch of layouts done, and usually they're just pretty much hot sloppy roughs. And then I go back and retroactively clean things up and eke things, and I typically try to work in batches of like 5. See what I can do for just like 5 per day is usually a good number to hit, because then I at least feel like I've got a significant amount of work done, and that I'm making progress. Because I want to be able to go back and see that progress was made, because progress is what helps keep me moving forward. So that might be at any various stage I'm working on getting some loose roughs done, getting some inking done, then going back and doing the lettering, then finally the color.
Okay.
And
so we're not talking about 5 finished pages a day.
It's just where I am in the process, yeah. And eventually, like kind of towards the end, that's when things start finalizing up. So so I'm trying to get book 2 done in about a year, and it's a little bit daunting, because this last time I got the first Norroway book, I had 5 years to spin my wheels and hum and haw over it. But now it's like, okay, it's got to get done. But I did Afar in about the same amount of time, so I'm pretty confident that I can do Norway too. And Norway's a little looser. It's then Afar was all like traditional media and watercolor, and it was very satisfying to do. But doing Norway digitally has just helped it get done a little bit faster.
Sure. Also, I imagine that on a project like this, where it's a multiple book thing, that familiarity makes it faster and easier. Yeah. Right? Because you're not starting from scratch with the second book.
Right, like the storyline has already kind of been there. Of course, when we meet up again with Sibylla, it's after, well, I don't want to give any spoilers away, but there's been a passage of time. So when we come back, she's changed quite a bit, just because time, and she's grown a lot in some ways, and she's kind of stymied in others. So that's where the story takes off. It's like, here's her arc and where she goes in the next chapter.
Yeah. And you said in passing you're working digitally, so 100%?
This time, yes. I always miss some aspect. I always want some element to be traditional, but this time around I've just been mostly working in Clip Studio, and from start to finish. But I have been kind of flirting with the idea of like, oh, what if I go back and do the second part traditionally? And Kat's like, you've already established a process for the first. Maybe the book should be consistent. So I'm like, yes, the book should be consistent. So for the sake of continuity, it's just going to continue with the same process. But we're already talking about future projects that we would like to pitch, and maybe stuff that could get a little bit more surreal. And for that kind of thing, I would love to get back into traditional media again.
You use a Wacom tablet, yes?
Well, right now I'm using an iPad Pro and an Apple Pencil,
Okay.
And It's great because now I was able to actually get some inking done on the plane, you know, coming in. So it's like wherever I go, I can work. So just from the utility aspect of it, having the ability to work pretty much anywhere, not have to worry about like, is the ink going to explode in my suitcase?
Sure,
you know?
sure.
So there's been some benefit to that.
Sure.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about the genesis of Norway. I mean, where did the book come from?
So when I was in grad school, I wanted to do we were taking a children's book class, my first session there, and I wanted to take a well-known fairy tale. It was called East of the Sun, West of the Moon, which is actually a Scandinavian kind of version of the same fairy tale. The only difference is giant polar bear, and instead of the siblings, you have the four winds: the east wind, the north wind, the south wind, and the west wind. And when I'd finished that project, I had pretty much just done the layouts for it and had gone no further with it. But Kat saw it, and it kind of piqued her interest because Kat has always had a huge amount of interest in folklore and fairy tales. And she was finishing up her undergraduate degree, and she was doing a creative writing element where she was going back and doing a lot of research and trying to find lost and obscure fairy tales. So this kind of hit a niche for her. And then she said, well, you always wanted to collaborate on a project. Why don't we just take this fairy tale and adapt it, and I'll write you out a script, and she's talking to me this way, and I would be able to illustrate it. And I was like, yeah, that sounds great to me because I don't have to do all that legwork of scripting and everything else. So she started doing a lot of research, and what she found is that there was just a lot of adaptations for East of the Sun, West of the Moon. She's like, the road has just been plowed so many times, let's find something a little different. And that's when she pitched me this Scottish fairy tale that she had in her file from that assignment. And it was pretty much the same structure. It's a lot like those Beauty and the Beast, Cupid and Psyche kinds of, it has that through line connection to old stories. I think this one is maybe about 200 or 300 years old as a fairy tale, but some of these through lines they think might even go back 7,000 years. Wow. So like we're talking all the way back to like Epic of Gilgamesh kind of thing. So it felt really kind of like there was a sense of familiarity to approaching fairy tales just because it's what we had grown up just being completely immersed in, and then it's that sort of sense of feeling like when you're taking that thread of a story that you're connecting yourself to that larger kind of, you know, the human stories of fairy tales and how they connect to us culturally and sociologically, and that there was just a lot there to explore, and taking something that was maybe a little bit less familiar to people but also still has a kind of familiar story. Sure. Felt like it was a good place to start.
And how did Kat write it? I mean, is it traditional comic script? Is it?
She's a playwright, so she writes it like a play. Okay. And I get scenes and I get acts, and I get the dialogue. But it's not like the whole thing about the panel and then the beat and the action and everything like that. It's more like, here's this exchange that's happening between characters. So sometimes Kat's early process in writing is a little bit sloppy, kind of like my layouts. She'll write an entire draft, and I will get this thing. I'm like, wow, this seems great. And then she'll send it off to all of her beta readers, and then she'll hum and haw over it, and she'll come back and she'll take the script and she'll gut it, and she'll explode everything out into Post-it notes. Everything goes up on her wall, like, I don't know, like that meme that you see from like Everything's Sunny in Philadelphia. And she's just like looking at everything, and she'll take whole sections of Post-it notes and move them over into a completely different section, and she'll cut an entire scene. And she'll go through this process over a couple of weeks or a month where she's just basically punching her guts out over the script. And then finally I'll get a final draft. And she sends me the whole thing. Because if I start on something while she's writing, there's no guarantee that she's not going to want to go back and say, like, actually that whole scene needs to be cut. Yeah. So it's better just to go ahead and let her write the script. And once she gets through her agony and ecstasy thing and she produces the script, I feel pretty confident that she's not going to try to tweak it anymore, and I can just go. So it's better just to let her finish. Yeah. Is there like another dialogue pass at the end, or does she get out of your way at that point? She pretty much gets out of my way. Okay. We do have this sort of thing where we each kind of try to stay in our own kitchen because we are siblings, and we do have things that push each other's buttons, and there are certain things that we fight about. So just because we so much kind of depend on each other as a support system. If Kat sends me the script, she's going to want me to like it. If I send her work, I'm going to want her to like it. If I come back and say, I'm not sure about this, she'll be fairly patient with me. Like if I say like this is too much dialogue, we can't have 80 pages of characters talking. It's not been that bad. I'm elaborating, but you know I'm also very touchy. If I get feedback from her, I can get critique from anybody else, and they can like put it through the ringer, and I'll be like, yes, I will take that into consideration, and I will go forth and do better. But it's different when it comes from Kat.
Sure.
So. With that being our kind of dynamic, we do have peers within our respective fields that we go to for feedback, because what we want to do is sort of, for our collaboration to work, is maintain that sense of support where we're not like nitpicking each other's work.
Sure.
Yeah.
So it almost sounds like it's harder to work with your sister than with the stranger. Well, stranger.
Well, yeah, I think in some ways, yes, and in some ways it's also really exciting, because we will sit down and we'll go through the story together, and everything that she wants to kind of put into the script before we really get to the writing phase, or when she's when she's hitting a particular part, we will sit down and we will get on the WhatsApp and we'll talk it all out. So I do feel like I have that sense of investment in the narrative, because I've helped her with the construction of it.
Okay.
So she'll spitball things at me. She's like, what do you think about this particular thing in the arc? I'm like, well, this could lead to this problem. But we always do that before she's written something, and then we'll sit down and we'll kind of review things when she's kind of getting to the next parts. But when she has things written, I try not to go back and nitpick that too much.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. I want to ask you guys in the audience if you have any questions. I know you do. All right, right in the front.
So when what's her name goes to the bull's brother, I don't know what his name is, I forget,
Esben, yeah.
So when she looks through that rock,
Yeah, the hagstone.
yeah, the hagstone, what was that creature that she saw? Like, what is that?
That is Esben without his glamour. So what Esben does is, in order to try to convince Sibylla that that he needs her help to kind of help his brother, he decides that if she sees him how he is when he's cursed, that she's going to be very, very frightened. So he invents a very elaborate mirage or a glamour to try to convince her that everything is normal. But when she looks through the hagstone, she sees things as they really are. So what she sees is a glimpse of Esben's curse. So you can kind of think of that as a representation of the curse, and what he's showing her is Esben pre-curse. And then that's what his curse manifests as.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So, like, Brom could have used what he used to look like a real person.
Possibly, yeah, but she does look at Brom too, and that's the thing about it. She looks at Brom through the hagstone too, and Brom is still just Brom. Brom's got some issues he's got to work through. Yeah.
Who's Brom fighting at the end?
Oh, good question. Brom is fighting the old one. Well, he goes to fight the old one, but at the end, I think, I don't know, what do you think? Who do you think he's fighting? That might be an interesting question to ask. You don't know? Yeah? You don't want to speculate? Yeah?
Well, the witch said he was fighting himself, so I think he was fighting himself.
That's good, yes. Yeah?
How did Sibylla get the hagstone when the Miss Witch is wearing it in the beginning on her necklace?
I think maybe we didn't imply that a little bit more strongly, because the hagstone was one of those things that showed up in the story, and then later on Kat was like, we need to be planting that a little bit earlier. But the indication is that the witch gives it to Sibylla at some point in the story. But that was a good catch, because that was one of those things where you talk about planting and payoff. And that one needed to be planted a little bit better and paid off a little bit better, I thought. Right. But there you go.
Sure. Well, it's all a learning process.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Creativity always is. You said you teach. That was a little obvious then, because you just suddenly took over and started.
Sorry.
No. It's perfect. It's fine with me. I thought that was really funny. Are you teaching college level? College level, and it's comics that you're.
Yes, I teach illustration, and I also occasionally get to teach comics class.
Okay.
And most of the time I teach either traditional illustration, where we work with like paint and ink and drawing and things like that, and then I'll teach a comics class once a year.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's super cool. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When is book 2 coming out?
As soon as I can get it done. I'm working on it really hard, I promise. So we're hoping to try to get it out in a year. So I know it's a long time to wait for a second book. Yes.
The brother seemed kind of evil.
Oh, does he? Yeah, Espen, I don't think Espen is evil, but his appearance, I think, makes sometimes people think that he is. But I think that's just how he looks. But it's like one of those things where people can appear a certain way and then kind of be different. Yeah. What's your question?
Why did you pick for Grom to turn into a bull?
Oh, that was the fairy tale. In the original fairy tale, Sibylla, the girl in the story, goes to see a fortune teller to get her fortune told, and she's told that she will be betrothed to the Black Bull of Norway. And in her mind, she thinks like, oh, I bet you that's going to be like this super cool knight who's got like this great suit of armor. And when he shows up, he's just a bull. So that's actually from the fairy tale. Yeah. And I don't know why they chose a bull. I think it has to do with, the story comes from Scotland, and their cattle and other kinds of animals had really, really important cultural relevance, because that was how people in Scotland for a long time survived, was having livestock. And so it had this like really kind of a powerful symbol for people. Any other questions? I did just kind of, yeah.
Yeah, you burned through them real fast. That's good. How much of the original fairy tale is the map, and how much of this is you expanding on it? Because I've never read the original, and I'm certain everyone here hasn't either.
We do. The first part of the book, this first chapter, is very much drawing from the fairy tale and then adding character development and character psychology into that. And then where we want to take it from book 2 is that we've also kind of tried to lay some groundwork where things that Sibylla does don't necessarily follow the pattern of a traditional fairy tale heroine. She's not compliant. I mean, she does have the sense of loyalty and things like that, but she also tends to have more of the personality that you think where you'd be spitting out the snakes and the toads as opposed to the pearls and the diamonds. And it's just, we wanted that character to have like this kind of fierce personality. So we wanted to see what would happen if you put a character like that into that fairy tale structure. And if we could maybe get her to break it. So what will happen is that the arc will kind of continue with the fairy tale. You'll see a lot of those familiar elements all the way through to the end. But we also want to incorporate some more of the other kinds of fairy tale lore that we've really sort of enjoyed. So we want to expand more on that world in the upcoming series.
Okay.
And expand the borders a little bit more, introduce new characters, try to kind of introduce some of the conflicts that were alluded to in the book, such as the trolls, which is also a part of the fairy tale. And we're really excited for where the story's going. It's going to get much deeper and much darker.
Is it challenging to add things to an existing story in terms of, I don't know, breaking the structure, or it ends up changing the story in a way?
In a way it does, yeah. I think that's the thing about adaptation is the kind of choices that you make in terms of what is going to be respectful to the source. And I think there is a sense of like, we do want to respect the source material, but also there are things that we want to talk about and things that we want to explore. And so there is this sort of navigation that we have to do where, and that's part of our discussions that we have when we sit down. We talk about elements that we want to introduce, themes that we want to explore. How is that going to work with the fairy tale? And we still think that ultimately it will still resonate with the original, but if we just kind of told the story just straight up from the fairy tale, I think there's just a lot of subtext there. I think that we could add to it that I think would make it a little bit more accessible for modern audiences. And so that's something that we wanted to do too.
Yeah?
Oh, darn it, I kind of forgot my question.
It's okay, it's the morning.
Yeah. Oh.
All right, when you get it, we'll come back to you.
Yeah.
Go.
Okay, so here at the end when Sibylla goes into help Bron, at the end, she fell.
Yeah, get right to the spoilers.
And then she got like outside the fight, so she was this like where she was before?
Well, she's in a different place, but she's on the other side of the glass mountain. Yeah.
Oh, okay. And then there's a village on the other side of the mountain.
That's right. Yeah, you got it. Yeah.
I have an idea for the second one.
Okay.
It's about if she gets help in the beginning and then she's whatever.
That's a good question. Yeah. She does get help.
Okay.
Yeah, and she actually gets some really, really good help, which you'll see in book 2, without giving you too many spoilers.
Is it just 2 books?
3. We're
3.
running out of
Okay.
trilogy. Yeah, because
Nice.
it's a typical like YA. Let's do a trilogy, right? So I think the reason why is originally I was thinking we would do something kind of like Out of the Yacht. Let's do a short 40-page story, and then Kat was like, "No, we're gonna do character development and psychological character growth, and we're gonna do this whole thing where we put her through like Steppenwolf, Hermann Hesse, Bildungsroman, like we're doing that." She's like, "Yes, we're doing this, and it's gonna run 1,000 pages." And I was like, "Okay, sure, I'm on board. Fine. Well, yeah, I'm not doing anything else. I'll clear my schedule." So yeah, that's what happened. It's not going to be 1,000 pages. It's probably going to run about 600. Yeah.
Oh, why does Brom's sword, when someone tries to give him the sword at the end of the book, why is it just like disappear? So
Oh, it's still kind of there if you look. It might be that because I haven't made it super clear, but when it gets struck by lightning, it gets melted. So it's basically part of that massive. Because the lightning strikes the glass mountain and then all the glass kind of shatters and melts into this weird kind of scorched thing. So it's kind of there, but it may not be very clear. Yeah.
and just like the bull like eat his face or something.
Maybe maybe in a magical kind of way where it's not like literal, but maybe it's a way to look at it. Yeah, sure.
And what are those people about?
Those are mysterious, aren't they? That will explain a little bit more in the second book. Yeah.
Okay, those are strange.
They are strange, aren't they? Yeah, it's because you can't really get a good look at them.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have a question?
Isn't that the sword?
Yeah, that's the sword. You found it.
It's there.
Yeah, it's just.
Oh yeah. Oh, it looks like a tree or something, or whatever the sticky things are.
Yep, the sticky things. Who do we want to...
So you haven't asked a question, so.
Yeah, I have a question about Espen. He was cursed as part of, was it like related to like a curse for Braun, or
Yeah, I think...
was it just his fault? Like
it was related to... Part of what happened with Brahm's curse is still quite a bit of a mystery. But yes, what happened to him affected his entire family, as I think his curses often would, because if it affects one person, it's also going to affect everybody around that person. So since Espen was part of Brahm's family, yeah, he was also affected by the curse. Yeah.
Hey, you.
Oh, okay. So here, when the guy was fighting the bull, which one was like actually Braun and which one was he like fighting? Was he like the person?
I think it was the person.
You think it was the person?
Yeah, because it shows him going in and then morphing into the person.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
Well, then there's also the thing too where the witch says that he's fighting himself, right? So he's actually fractured into two. He's fighting himself. So it's a representation of him fighting himself.
Oh wait, so that's the witch, or was that her sister?
That's Mara. That's the witch.
Oh,
Yeah.
what is she doing there? She looks like she's gaining some weight.
That happens as you get older. But good catch. Yes, she did gain some weight because she's a little older, and she's changing too as part of the curse. Yeah. Yes, you have a question?
You said Braun's whole family is cursed. How is his sister cursed?
Oh, it's her.
That's an interesting question about whether or not Dagny is cursed. She is tied into the curse in a particular way, but the way that the curse affects people depends upon their actions. Esmond got cursed in a particular way because he did nothing. What happened to Dagny, I think we explore it a bit more in book 2 and we explain it a little bit more in depth. But that's the other thing too, is like I don't think Sibylla actually asks Dagny if she's cursed. Like I said, the curse kind of affects everybody in different ways, but I don't think the way that the curse has affected Dagny is anything physical. Like if you looked at her through the Hagstone, she probably would look the same.
Yeah, but like there were shoes.
The shoes, yes. That was all. That's all tied in with what happened
Did
to
she
Brom's
like
family.
not know that the shoes were like burning hot or something?
She did. It was her punishment for
so
running away.
So she had to wear the shoes and dance in them?
Yeah, it's one of those. It's actually from another fairy tale that we wove into the story.
I've been noticing how like the mouse is like a human.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, because that's Matilda.
I remember that from a different fairy tale. Like, oh,
Yeah, you're catching all those things. That's exactly what we've done. Is we wanted to kind of pepper in some of the other fairy tale
and
lore
she
that we
ended
really
up
liked.
murdering her.
Yeah, because fairy tales can be pretty dark and scary and have lots of really weird things happen. So we loved all that stuff when we read those fairy tales when we were kids.
So like go to like the fantasy section.
Maybe, yeah, a little bit of fantasy, yeah, quite a lot of it. Yeah.
Did you write any other books?
I have mostly been an illustrator, and so another book that I have illustrated is also another young adult book called Afar, and that one was written by my friend Layla Del Duca, and she is also an artist, and she's done 2 series. She's done Shudder and another series called Sleepless, which if you like fairy tales, you might also really like Sleepless. Yeah. You have a question too?
Oh, yeah. So, like, judging, like, from the clues in the book, is it like Brom's curse? Is it like he was the knight, and then the king tricked him into killing his daughter so he could sacrifice his daughter to the old one so he could get cursed?
You got it, yeah.
Why would he do that?
Because he didn't know. He was just paying attention to the king. I don't think he knew.
This is also like getting into the problem of Brom.
Sure.
And Brom's problems are very, very complex. So you're yeah.
Brom's kind of mysterious.
Brom's a very mysterious guy.
It's
Yes,
like,
he is.
oh look, we
You have a question too?
some food.
Yeah, wine, bread, everything comes out of his ears. Yeah, you have a question?
It's actually a comment.
Oh, okay. Let's hear it.
Sleepless actually reminds me of when I couldn't fall asleep last night because I was in my first bunk and the pillow was so uncomfortable.
Have you read Sleepless?
No.
Oh, you might check it out because it's actually about a princess and her knight who protects her, but he never sleeps. So it's also a really kind of mysterious story. Yes, and that's how he protects her. Yeah, he's part of a whole troop of sleepless knights, and that's how they protect the royal family. Is they never sleep until they do finally sleep, and then it's like a question of when they'll ever wake up.
Yeah, and then they never wake up. It's like,
Yeah.
it's like they sleep for as long as they've been awake, and they're like, okay, I'm awake
Yeah.
now. And everyone's sitting around, oh, come on.
Yeah, but it's tough not being able to sleep. I experience that too sometimes, and
They hate it, can't get comfortable.
all right, you're thinking all those thoughts. Yeah.
Yep. How long is the original fairy tale? Like a
it's-
traditional fairy tale kind of.
It's about
couple
traditional
pages,
fairy tale
yeah.
length. It's actually, I think it's a little bit denser and a little bit longer than the standard fairy tale because
Okay.
there's a lot of weird stuff that goes down in this one. Because there's like, it's almost got a very interesting kind of 3-act structure where in the beginning she goes on the journey with the bull, she breaks the rules, she gets tossed down the mountain, then she's like, and I'll just go ahead and tell you guys the fairy tale kits since you can find it yourself, it's in the public domain. She works for 7 years as a blacksmith, and then finally she apprentices for a blacksmith so she can learn to build the shoes that she needs to help her climb the glass mountain. And when she gets to the top of the glass mountain to try to find Brom, she finds that he's been kidnapped by the troll queen and her daughters. And then the girl has to go into disguise and creep into the castle and pretend to be a maid. And then she has to get all these things that she got from the siblings, which was like a couple of charms or things like that. And she uses these charms to turn them into beautiful dresses to give to the queen's daughter to give her a minute to talk to the prince. And yeah, it goes on for quite some time. And then there's like this whole thing that goes down with washing a shirt. Yeah.
What?
There's a whole thing in the fairy tale about washing a shirt. Yes,
Is it
laundry's a big
special
deal in this fairy tale.
What's the
It's called the Black Bull of Norroway. And it is, you can find the actual fairy tale if you want like a glimpse of what the future books can hold, because we will still be drawing a lot from the source material. You can read the fairy tale. And it's for free to find online, or there's a couple of books you can find it in. Tatterhood and Other Tales is a series of fairy tales that has stories like The Black Bull of Norway in it. And then there's Tatterhood and Other Tales. And then there's another one called The Blue Fairy Book by Andrew Lang, and that fairy tale also appears in that book. And you can read a bunch of others too. You get really well versed in your fairy tales, and then you can see all the little things we're covering in the series.
But you're not necessarily using the fairy tale slavishly, right?
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're using it basically as a loose scaffolding to kind of build our own world off of. Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. You guys really like this one, yeah? Well, this is a bigger crowd than we get sometimes, so I'm pretty impressed that you guys all showed up.
Well, I'm super stoked to get to see you all and answer your questions.
Yeah.
It's been awesome.
Yeah, I think your art is just lovely.
Oh, thank you.
There's just a very fairy tale-ish quality to it. I think just natively, you know, and I think it's just very pretty, and I like the world building, and yeah, this is good stuff. This is good stuff. Yeah.
Well, thank you guys so much.
Yeah. Do we have any last questions from the crowd? Yeah.
It's one for you.
Okay.
What's next month's book?
Oh, I'll get to that in just a minute. You're jumping ahead. You're jumping ahead. That's good.
She's
though.
on it, yeah.
You're like really anxious. I like that. I want to take a minute, and I wanna thank Kit for the pins. Everybody got
You guys got a
pin,
pin?
right?
Sweet.
Yeah.
Glow up,
so
yeah.
it glows in the dark, and it's a metal pin, and nobody's ever made us a metal pin like this before. That is
Yeah.
so cool.
Ah. You got a magpie on your hat.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a thank you so much for this, and I think everybody really appreciated
Well,
it.
and those are special. We made those pretty much for you guys, so you guys got them first before anybody else did. So, yes. You did. It's exclusive for you. So, well, I mean, now we'll have them out. I guess I'll figure out a way to kind of do something with the rest of them. But we thought it would be neat if you guys had something special, because we thought that this was a really cool thing that you guys were doing this. This whole like subscription crate thing is awesome.
Yeah, no, we really, 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 really appreciated it. Okay, so the book was Norroway. If you're watching this at home, go out and get this book. It is really, really good. Right, guys? It's really good. Everybody's going to enjoy it? Yeah. I thoroughly recommend it. Very good. I like that. I want to thank you, Kit, for coming out and taking the time to speak to us.
Oh, thank you for having me.
And I very much want to thank The Beat, again, www.comicsbeat.com. You know, you kids probably don't care about anything that's there, but it's a great website for comics news and information, and they're very nice people for sponsoring this. I want to thank everybody who showed up today for coming out, because it's starting to rain, and I know it's, well, not quite yet, but it's about to, and that keeps people indoors, so I'm really glad you guys came all out. And I want to thank Jordan, our tech support, tech guy, for handling the show. Next month, our book is Hex Vet by Sam Davies, and it's about a veterinarian for witches and all the magical creatures. So I think you'll like this a lot. Sam Davies is a creator who is in, I want to say they are in England. So next month it's going to be a video call. I cannot bring people in from England. I wish I could. I'm good, but I'm not that good. So I hope you still come out for that, because I think that'll be really good. Do you have a question?
Yes. Can we pick that up today?
You'll be able to pick Hexbed up today. Yes. You will be 2 weeks ahead of everybody else. I don't have the buttons or anything for those yet, but we'll get that taken care of very soon. And just in general, I just want to thank everybody for coming out. I love Norroway. I love comics.
Thank you.
I love your work, so thank you very much.
Gosh, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Yay.